Hey guys, got to keep this one short because I'm losing my voice today. It's not from the Rona, I can assure you of that. It happens to me every time the seasons change, so it's just bad timing. My guest today is Mike Miller, a veteran of the American comics industry. He's been working, as he'll tell you, since the 90s. He's worked on dozens of titles for all the big companies, including Game of Thrones and Injustice. His book Lone Star has raised over $100,000 in crowdfunding, and I've had the pleasure of appearing on his YouTube channel for a show called Drawn and Quartered, which we'll talk all about later. One quick side note before we begin. For anyone interested in my series Mary Sue, this will be the final weekend, which I'm crowdfunding issues 3 and 4 on Indiegogo. We're about 75% of the way through, and I have a couple of new books up for sale on my Etsy store based on my comic strips that have been doing pretty good on Twitter and Instagram lately. Links to all these will be in the description. And that's it for now. I hope you guys enjoy this episode of Podlomatic with Mike Miller. As a start, I suppose, I'm curious to ask about your career biography. When did you start drawing? When did you consider doing this as a career?
Um, my oldest brother says I started drawing when I was 2 with him, but I have no factual evidence for that.
Uh,
But it might have been why I took to it because he's a good artist, and I could see me wanting to draw like him when I was little. Um, and so yeah, I always loved to draw. I was always the artist in class. I remember in 3rd grade being the one they would go to for it sounds a little silly, but I just remember drawing the American Dental Association logo for the school play.
mhm,
And I'm in 3rd grade doing this because I can make it look like the actual logo.
mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I just always drawn and always but I got into comics in about third third grade, around 19, what year was that? 81, 82,
Mhm.
something like that. Um, and by 7th grade, I remember my 7th grade art teacher, she did a assignment where she's like, make a business card for your future career. And I made a, Mike Miller Marvel comic book artist trading or business card. I wonder if I still have that somewhere. That'd be funny.
That'd be funny to have
Um,
framed, yeah.
yeah.
I still have my
um,
old kindergarten drawings somewhere.
yeah. Yeah, my mom didn't keep a lot of my stuff, so anything I have, it's stuff that I kept, and it's probably been very badly stored by now, so
Yeah.
it won't make it into the annals of the
The
of my
museum.
autobiography.
um, One of the things that you mentioned made me think of another question. Is one of the ancient questions, I guess, for artists is like, do you think we're born with it? Do you think it's trained into us? What do you think are the components? It's,
I I think it's aptitude and desire.
mhm,
Um, I have a personal pet peeve against the word talent because to me, talent is a measure of aptitude, how quickly you are capable of learning a skill. And when someone looks at a piece of art or a sculpture or a delicious plate of expertly made pasta, it's not talent. You're so talented. It's not talent. It's You don't know if it took me 20 minutes to learn that skill or if it took me 20 years to learn that skill. All
mhm,
you can see is the final product, which is how skilled a person has become at producing whatever it is,
mhm.
right? So, and it's just a silly little pet peeve of mine, but it's almost insulting to me when someone says I'm talented, even though I may be. I do pick up things, but I've got a friend who's a professional comic book artist who it took him forever to get to that place, right?
Mhm.
But when people say you're so talented, it's like it doesn't mean anything. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on this pet peeve of mine, but it is aptitude, how quickly you can pick something up, plus a love for that thing. If you love to draw, eventually, if you're willing to take critique and if you're willing to learn, eventually you can get to the place where you're just as skilled as the most talented of us. In the old days, they used to make drawing and painting part of your classical education. It didn't matter, right? It didn't
Mhm.
matter how talented you were. That was part of your education. And so learning the skill set itself was part of your classical education. And we don't do that anymore. I don't think they even teach art in school anymore. But
Well, I
yeah,
suppose it wouldn't be considered one of the core skills for making a
right.
living these days. Not a lot of artists I know can consistently make a living at it, unless they work in certain
True.
industries.
However, here's the thing. There's like if you learn the skills of drawing, of graphic design, of just understanding how to make something visually appealing, um, there's like 500 different jobs you can get. Yeah, granted, some of them pay very poorly, but some of them pay very well.
Hmm.
I've chosen a profession that pays very poorly because I don't just love to draw. I love storytelling,
Hmm.
and so that's the act of taking a story from my brain and visualizing it. This is the entire process that I enjoy, and so I've chosen comic books, and it's kept me in the poorhouse for most of my adult career. I mean, yeah, I've had good years, I've had bad years, but you know what? If I got a buddy who wanted to be in comics, I got him a job at a video game company. He used the same skill set, developed it further into 3D, and is has done phenomenally well. I know other comic book artists who are like, all right, they tapped out of comics, ended up in video games. They're rocking their Teslas and their Porsches, and they're they're living large in San Diego. And meanwhile, I'm here like, I love comic books.
Hmm.
And
Well,
plus, I don't want to go into an office as well. So there's that rebellious part of me that just doesn't want to be told where and when to be someplace.
mhm. Yeah, a lot of people have learned these past few months, especially with working from home. Some people, it's it's something you don't want to give up once you've tasted it. And
Yes.
part of it also is, of course, the passion for the craft. I'm sure you grew up reading these books, and there's
Hmm.
something that happens to us when we're young, I suppose, that you just fall in love with the medium and you love it
Yeah.
so much you want to make that sort of thing. Did you go to college, art school? How did you break into the industry?
I was going to De Anza College and up in Cupertino, the Bay Area,
Hmm.
and I was doing my general education because I wanted to go to Art Center College of Design, um, which was really weird because at the time, the first time I went to the portfolio review, they rejected my portfolio because they said I had too much comic book art in my portfolio.
Hmm.
Um,
You would have been 16, 17?
yeah, I think 17, 18,
Okay.
something like that. And then
And that wasn't
now
considered a real art.
that wasn't considered real art. Now, of course, they have a comic book degree, so you could go to Art Center now, and I could be one of their teachers.
Hmm.
But they wouldn't. They rejected me back in 1988, 1989, right? Um, and so I was working on my portfolio, taking life drawing classes and all that stuff, and oil painting and airbrush and all that stuff, which I already knew how to airbrush, but you got to go get the credits.
Hmm.
Photography. I was taking a very art heavy course at this community college in order to eventually transfer to hopefully Art Center College of Design, and then which some of my friends actually did end up going there, but that's another point. My it was the boom. It was 1991, 92. Um, and comics were the big deal. And
Was Image breaking off by that point, or
Image
still?
Image had announced in 90, late 91, early 92, something like that.
All right, because that was an explosion, right?
Yeah, it was around that. It was all around that time.
Hmm.
And then so in 92, I was like, well, I heard, and I still don't know today to this day if it's true, but I heard Ron Lim was making like $30,000 a month drawing comics.
Mhm.
I don't know where I got. Well, of course, it's Ron Lim, so he's probably drawing 3 books at a time. Um, and I was just like, well, at the time, I was kind of out of comics because my dad made me quit reading comics in 7th grade, um, and I kind of got back into it like on the sly in high school, and then more so after high school, I got back into it during that boom.
Mhm.
But my purpose of going to art school and all, I wanted to do movie posters. I wanted to be Drew Struzan,
Mhm.
right? Um, but when I heard, hey, Ron Lim's making $30,000 a month, I'm like, I can draw comic books, right? I was
I
always
see.
drawing comic stuff, anyways. So I'm like, well, I'll give this a shot. So I took all my comic book stuff that I had been doing, um, stuck it in a brown garbage bag, not garbage bag, but a grocery bag, and I went to WonderCon, which was my local convention at the time. Uh, I had met Jeff Johnson at a Bay Area comic book club meeting like the week before WonderCon, and I showed him my stuff, and he's like, yeah, come see me at the con. And so I went up there and I did the rounds, the portfolio reviews. I had a meeting with Tom DeFalco there, and he asked me if I was tracing, and I'm like, what? I'm like,
Hmm.
no. He's like, and then so he gave me his business card, and he's like, send me a package. And I'm like, okay. I didn't really mean a lot. I mean, I got his card, so I was like, yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
And so I did the rounds. I hadn't gotten any work. I don't know what I was supposing. I was supposing people would just hire me on the spot, I guess. Because I didn't know how any of this went. This was my first comic book convention.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and so I went to Jeff, and and he's like, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I'm like, I showed stuff and blah blah blah. And he's like, "Go show your stuff to Chris Ulm at Malibu." I'm like, "Chris Ulm?" He's like, "Yeah." And so I walked up to Malibu. Chris was the first guy I saw. I'm like, "Is there a Chris Ulm here?" And he's like, "I'm Chris." I'm like, "Jeff Johnson told me to show you this," and I dropped my brown paper bag of artwork.
Hmm.
And he like starts looking. He's like, nice presentation. And he's like picks it up and starts looking through it. And he's like, this is great. He's like, I'll give you some work. And I'm like, what? Really?
Oh yeah, they were scouting very heavily back then, right?
Yeah, that's right. They
How
were
old
they
were
were.
you? You would have been 19, 20?
It was 1992, and
Oh,
this
I'm
was
sorry.
before my 20th birthday. Yes.
Okay.
So
That's very
no,
impressive then.
before my 21st birthday.
And what
So
did they want from you? Pencils, inks?
they wanted pencils. Now here's the funny part of the story,
Mhm.
because my bag was all pencils, right? Um, and he was going to give me penciling work. Uh, I was so excited because, hey, I went to my first Comic Con and I got my first job, and ultimately, I went home and I scanned in, like, this was Friday, Saturday, right? So like on Monday, I scanned in this drawing. You remember the old Wizard magazine contest where they, draw someone in a wizard robe and we'll put it in the fan thing?
No, I must have been too young for that, but that's funny.
Oh, okay. Well, I had this illustration of Colossus wearing the wizard robe, which is a robe with stars all over it, right?
Okay.
And I had inked it with a rapidograph. It was in my sketchbook, so I took a Xerox of it and I wrote, hey, don't forget about me. Then attention, Chris Ulm. It was inked with a rapidograph because I had no idea what tools to use for an inker,
Hmm.
right?
Must have taken
And
forever.
I faxed it to Chris Ulm,
Mm.
and he calls me back in 5 minutes. And he's like, Mike, I'm like, yeah. He's all, this is Chris Ulm. Is this how you ink? And I'm like, now keep in mind, this is a fax of a photocopy
Yeah.
from my sketchbook. And I'm like, yeah, I guess, but you said you were gonna give me penciling work. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll give you penciling work, but we need an inker right now. I'm like, okay. So he starts sending me covers and interiors for, I forget what the first book, it might have been, I think it was Protectors. I think they put me on Protectors like right away as the regular inker,
Hmm.
and I inked that book for like 2 years. Um, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I was like going to Aaron Brothers and just buying different markers and trying stuff, and I was inking with just felt tip art markers, which I highly do not recommend.
Hmm.
Um,
Did they
Hector,
send you? I'm sorry. They sent you the originals. How did you? How was inking work?
that's how it was back then. There was no internet.
Uh-huh.
There was FedEx. There was originals. Then you go to Kinko's and you run copies off to keep for yourself, and then you ship the rest back. Batches at a time.
Hmm.
And so he, good to his word, he did give me right out of the gate. He gave me work doing pencils and inks on the covers of protectors for the newsstand editions.
Hmm.
So my first penciling work in comic books was as a cover artist.
That's pretty
And
nuts.
these covers are terrible. I mean, you don't want to look. This was 2020. Holy cow, how many years ago was this? 28 years ago?
Man. And it's really interesting to look at. All right, so that time in comics history was especially. It was like a boom, a huge
Yeah.
market explosion happening. They couldn't find talent fast enough. They had so much money, right? I
Yep.
think Malibu, forgive me, which one of the guys was running it? It wasn't.
Chris Ulm was editor in chief.
Okay.
You might be thinking of Dave Ulbrich or Scott Rosenberg.
Hmm.
Those were the owners.
Okay. But so at that time, the talent search, as far as I remember, or at least from what I've heard, it was nuts. They couldn't fill the seats fast enough. But here comes this talent out of nowhere, I guess. You inked a few pages. Man, I don't even know what to ask next. There's so many questions. Did you sort of dig yourself into a hole by inking using rapidographs and sharpies? Did you
Um,
streamline it? Did it go faster later on?
I I I mean, I couldn't have inked, dude. I was inking like 4 or 5 pages a day. I was just because I didn't know what I was doing.
But they seem to
And
like it, right?
they seemed to like it. I mean, they kept giving me work. They gave me more and more work. But I was, at the same time, I was sending stuff up off to sample pages to Marvel. I ended up getting a fill-in issue on Cable number 12. That was my first work for Marvel, and then I got work at DC on a miniseries called Triumph. Um, then and then I went to San Diego Comic Con. I met um, I met Victor Bridges there. He was just sitting there drawing, and I was watching him, and he was inking with this weird metal pen. And I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like, "This is a Croquill 102. This is what Terry Austin inks with." I'm like, "Seriously?" He's like, "Yeah." And he gave me one, and he gave me a page of his to practice inking on.
Wow.
And turns out Vic Bridges was had been hired by Eric Larson to do Freak Force, right?
Hmm.
And so it was like the Monday or Tuesday after San Diego, Victor calls me up, and he hadn't even seen my inks yet. Like I had never inked with a quill before. He'd given me this page. I had sat there. I had gotten about half of the page done with my practicing crow quills for the first time ever. He calls me up and he's like, "Hey, we're looking for an inker for Freak Force." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, do you want to try out? I'll send you a promo piece." And I'm like, "Sure." So he sends me a promo piece.
Hmm.
I ink it. It's literally the second thing I've ever inked with a crow quill. I sent it to Eric Larson and he loved it. And that's how I got the job inking Freak Force.
How long did you do that?
Um, about a year. I did it for about a year, and then I took some really bad advice from Jim Lee. Jim said, "Mike, do you want to be a penciler or an inker?" And I said, "A penciler." And he said, "Well, then you should stop inking."
Stop.
Yeah, this was Jim Lee's genius advice. You should stop inking if you want to be a penciler. So I quit Freak Force like an idiot.
But weren't
Uh,
the guys, I mean, maybe you can't answer this, I don't know, but weren't they feuding on the inside about like poaching each other's talent and stuff?
yeah, but I wasn't in studio, so I was getting work at at Wildstorm, and from Eric,
Hmm.
and from Extreme or Awesome at the time. Wait, what was it? Was it Extreme at the time? Yeah, Extreme. Um, so I was working for three of the founders or their studios.
Okay, sort of as
Uh,
a pinch hitter.
yeah, yeah,
So Jim Lee
and
advised.
Marvel and DC. So I was just trying to keep my schedule full, right?
Uh-huh. And I'm sorry, so you took his advice and stopped inking?
Yeah, for a bit, but then I started inking my own stuff. So I would get work at Wildstorm or so. Well, actually, I did a lot of inking at Extreme. I did some penciling and inking there, just a little bit, and then I did a lot of penciling and inking, but it was all pinch hitting for Wildstorm. I
Mm.
never got my own book there, or a run on anything. It was all pinch hitting. It was an issue here. It was 10 pages there. It was this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
Um,
What
but
was
I
the?
was penciling and inking my own stuff at that point.
Were you trying to write stories as well when you were
Uh,
pitching? I mean.
well, oddly, before all of that, I was working on a horrible little book called Heart of Darkness. I was kind of co-writing it with my friend Eddie, and my buddy Matt was the inker on that. And that we actually it was supposed to be published by Cry for Dawn. Do you remember that?
I'm not familiar.
It was Joseph Linsner's company,
Hmm.
but it had been accepted by Linsner, and then there was for some reason, he and his business partner split up, and Linsner left to do his own thing, and then it became CFD Productions, and then they published the first issue of Heart of Darkness. And I don't know, I guess I expected to actually make some money from this thing, but nothing came in for the first issue, so I'm like, well, I'm not just going to work for free.
Okay.
And so I kind of bailed on the second issue, even though
So
it's half drawn.
I see. The deal, I mean, there's all kinds of deals back then, but I suppose it was a sort of you only get paid if you sell books kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know, hindsight, I'm sure I would have made 100 different decisions, but it was the boom. I was getting paid $250 a page to ink for Eric,
Hmm.
right? 250 to ink,
Even
which
today, that's a lot.
yeah, but it was during the boom, so they were paying. I mean, they were paying some of these guys $1,000 a page. It was Image had so much money, they were just they were going nuts, just throwing it at the artist because they're like, well, we were the artists and we didn't get paid enough, so now we're just going to pay all our artists like
Hmm.
everything. It's like,
I remember Image started as a sort of like a there's no union, so let's make our own company. There was documentaries I've seen where they talk about because there's no union, let's take the power into our own hands, something like that.
yeah, I don't know if it was a union thing. I don't even remember hearing that.
Well, I just
But,
remember that they were saying one of their core things was that we're not artists aren't paid enough and they're not given what's the word I'm looking for? They're not given a piece of the profit from the most successful book, something like
sure.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it makes sense if they were paying their artists a lot of money, and it seemed, of course, like the bubble wouldn't pop.
Yeah.
Where were you, or
Bubbles
how
always
did
pop.
was the writing on the wall at the time? Did you guys get a warning that something was up, or
From whom? What do you mean?
I'm sorry, when and if the bubble popped suddenly? I don't know if it was a gradual thing. Were the companies worried that something was up? Um, I don't remember if it was an
No,
exact year or if it was a gradual thing.
I think it was more or less a gradual thing. It wasn't a cliff, right? It was just sales started coming down. I remember there was this one book, Cybrid. Remember Cybrid? It was a character that Sam Liu designed for Eric. No, not Eric. For Rob, and Rob had me do a cover for it and solicit it, and I think the numbers came back something like 30,000
Hmm.
or something like that. And Rob decided, well, that's not enough, so he just canceled the book. It's like,
That's
so
funny. Well,
yeah, I
their
never
top
did.
books were
There's a
getting.
cover. There's a cover out there somewhere of my Cybrid piece, but if it had done better, but that was kind of the thing, right? People stuff was sliding down, and we're at the point where we think that 30,000 isn't enough to bother publishing a comic book, and then eventually you're like, well, 30,000, I'm in the top 10.
Yeah, I think back then, again, this documentary that I can't remember the name of, they were. I think their top books were in the millions, and
Oh yeah.
that was barely considered a success for Image back then.
There was a time when Marvel would cancel a comic if it sold less than 100,000.
Yeah,
Now
strange.
it's like you have to be in the top 5 to sell 100,000 in this market.
Yeah. Okay, for anyone listening, I had to pause real quick to check on the recording. But yeah, on the business end of all this, so these companies, let's say Big Two, Big Three, they were selling tons and tons of copies. They had a ton of employees, and they were bleeding money, apparently. What do you think is the psychology behind these companies where they want to keep doing better and better, and they keep spending more and more, not realizing that this golden age may not last? Were you were you prepared for it? Was it a surprise? How did it affect you,
Um,
or did
I
it
mean,
affect you?
you never really prepared because look, when you're in the middle of that kind of a thing, you don't expect the gravy train to end,
Hmm.
right? It's like you're not, and we all should have been. We're not squirreling away our money into the stock market. We're like, oh, cool, I'll buy another car or whatever.
Hmm.
You make foolish decisions because you're like, well, if I made 10 grand this month, I'll make 10 grand next month, and so I'll make 10 grand the month after that, and then one of these days it's like, oh, by the way, the work is drying up. Yeah, we can't pay you as much as we were on the last project. Oh, we went bankrupt. I I've
Yeah.
had that happen uh, multiple times.
Hmm.
For people owe me money, and then suddenly, yeah, we're bankrupt. So, I mean, even Marvel went bankrupt in '99. It was just, and I think that was just entering sort of a difficult time for everyone, and it kind of reset expectations and page rates, and in a way that to this day the industry is still not recovered from the burst bubble of the late 90s,
Hmm.
right?
What
I
were?
mean, my page rate at DC, when I left a couple years ago, was $20 more than it was in the year 2000. That's the lack of recovery. It didn't match up with what do you call it, inflation.
Right. So it must have been almost 20 years worth of the the leveling 20 years later still had barely gotten back to where it was before.
Which is so bizarre because during that 20 years, comic book properties were the biggest thing on earth, media wise.
Hmm.
And Marvel and DC did zero, zilch to monetize that towards comics. It was all about the movies. It was all about the swag you could get at Target and Walmart, and
Hmm.
they did nothing to put comics of this massive multi-billion-dollar enterprise into the hands of kids. And wow, what a lack of foresight.
You mentioned kids. Do you think part of, um, I guess, all right, so a lot of the money must have come from older buyers, nostalgia buyers. Do you think they didn't sow enough seeds and that's why the industry is where it is now?
Absolutely. Yeah, they stopped caring about kids in the 90s. in the 90s.
All right, because comics were growing up in the '90s in a big way. I know they were going towards edgy.
Yeah, and part of it was, pulling comics out of newsstands and not because you're in the direct market and you're sort of in this niche enterprise where you're not forced to abide by standards. I mean, they got rid of the Comics Code Authority as soon as they could, which I think was a bad idea. I know some people just hate the Comics Code Authority. You got to remember, Comics Code Authority was voluntary. It was absolutely voluntary. Nobody had to abide the Comics Code Authority, and there were people who didn't. But it it made books available to a younger reader, and it forced people to work in sort of a sandbox of rules whereby, yes, you can do all this great stuff and you can use your imagination, but you have to abide these certain rules and look, figure out creative ways to get around why you can't show someone's brain being blown out of the back of their head, or why you can't show somebody jamming a needle into their arm. Because we want to make these stories, even if they're mature stories, we want them to be available to children, so that, because that's when you get people hooked on comics, is when they're kids, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
It is. Yeah, I'm a 48-year-old guy who loves the nostalgia of picking up a comic book and leafing through the pages. If I had never seen a comic book until I was in my 30s, do you think I would have jumped all over that at that point? Probably not. But that's when you got to get them. You got to get them as kids. And if you've got 3 decades of almost nothing being made available for children, in the sense that, look, I've got a stack of graphic novels over here, and my wife's like, "Hey, let's have the kids read some graphic novels," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't even know what in there I can show them."
Among your
And
collection.
it's all Marvel and DC, right? It's like, because I've read the Teen Titans and I've read the Avengers, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not giving this to my kids.
Yeah.
I'll give them the stuff from the 80s for sure. Some good old John Byrne, Chris Claremont X-Men. Read it all. I'll give them Bigfoot Bill and Earthworm Jim and Titan, Mounts of Might and Lone Star. But I'm not giving them Teen Titans. It's not going to happen.
I see. And a lot of, I would even argue that manga's been sort of filling that vacuum, but that's kind of a whole other beast.
Yeah, well, manga they've got 301 flavors, right?
Yeah.
So
how do you even know what to
pick? There is manga available for children, and there's manga that you don't want anywhere near your children.
That's true.
But we're talking about Marvel and DC, who have the bulk of comics. I ain't give them nothing from Image. I mean, except for maybe Doug TenNapel stuff, because he does publish through there. But most of the Image crap is no, my you can read that when you're 18. But yeah, we're talking about Marvel and DC, the figureheads, the main line for the comic book industry, and this is the stuff that I have to pick through and see if I want my kids seeing.
Yeah.
That's not how it should be. That was a huge failure on their part. They should have stuck to Marvel Knights. You want mature line? Here's Marvel Knights. You want a mature line? Here's Vertigo, right? If you want to bring Batman into a Vertigo to do adult stories or overtly mature stories, do that. Leave the rest of the line so that an 8-year-old can pick it up and just fall in love with Batman.
Yeah, I guess some kind of rating system at some point would have been a good idea, but this would have been years ago.
Yeah, it's over.
All right, so back to the timeline real quick, if you don't mind. I'm curious about your later years at DC and what caused you to part ways with them.
Well, for a time, I was on JLA around the turn of the century, and there was a blacklisting that occurred because I was talking too much about my Christian faith, apparently. Well, I wasn't even really talking about my Christian. It's not like I brought it up. All right, so here's what happened. I was at a Superman panel because prior to JLA, I was working on Adventures of Superman, and I was up there with Jeff Loeb, and I forget who else was there. Some of the other Superman creators at the time. And Jeff Loeb was saying on the panel that Superman was a Christian. He was, raised in the Bible Belt, so it doesn't make sense for him to have been not a Christian. He was raised by Ma and Pa Kent, who were clearly people who have portrayed Christian sensibilities throughout their entirety in the DC Comics history.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, yeah, of course. Why is this even an argument? And so I was on the DC message board, and I'm like, hey, Jeff Loeb said that Clark Kent is a Christian. And I was like, that's great, And I got so much hate for saying it. I'm like, I didn't say it. I'm like, I'm just repeating what Jeff Loeb, the writer on the #1 selling Superman book, was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to report it. And so I got these people, oh, you're a Christian, what do you think about homosexuality? And I'm like, I am a Bible believing Christian. I believe everything the Bible says. And so they just wouldn't let that go. And so there was a group of, now this was years before the term SJW appeared on the lexicon, but this group that called themselves the GLA, the Gay League of America, started a letter writing campaign to the editors at DC Comics to get me blacklisted.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 12-issue maxi series, a JLA maxi series based on the movie Guns of Navarone, greenlit, which means we were prepping. The writer was working on the script, and we were prepping to launch that. And again, I was working on JLA at the time, and that disappeared. And then I couldn't get any more work from my JLA editor, and then I couldn't get any work from my Superman editor, and I didn't know. Well, the editor at the time was on the Batman line was Bob Schreck, and he's what I believe we would call an SJW in these modern times. And so it was funny. So that the work just dried up, and I couldn't get I couldn't get a fill-in issue. In fact, I had a fill-in issue drawn for JLA, penciled and inked, beautiful. Len Kaminsky wrote it, and it never got published. And so I was persona non grata all of a sudden. And then it was really funny because a gay friend of mine, Darren Davis, who runs Blue Water, is it Blue Water? Blue Tide? Blue something? I don't know, something like that. He calls me up and he's like, dude, you've been blacklisted at DC. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I've got a friend over there who also happened to be another gay friend of his. And he's like, and I'm not throwing the I have gay friends thing. This is the facts. And he's like, yeah, they are talking about it at DC. You've been blacklisted for the stuff you said on message board. And I'm like, great. So I was working. What was I doing at the time? I was working on. I was working on G.I. Joe versus Transformers and Hedge Knight stuff. So I was working on other properties. And then I started Alias Comics. And then I picked up Darren's entire line of books, 10th Muse and Victoria's Secret Service and all this stuff. So I published him. He actually came in and worked at the office in San Diego for while we were going. And then that lasted, about 2 years, I think. And then things kind of got shaky there. I'm just trying to go through the timeline here.
Sure.
Even though it's just going way off of what the question was, I think. What was the question?
Well, it was really a sort of examination of what caused the split, but I'm also interested in the sort of circumstances because it affects many people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. And so later, so DC bought out Wildstorm, right? Which was great because Wildstorm was still a thing. And then DC absorbed Wildstorm. Um, but the great thing about my blacklisting at DC was that it was the New York office that had the blacklist. And they called Wildstorm DC West Coast. And I've been working with those guys since 1993. So there's no way the blacklist was going to apply to me at Wildstorm. So I started getting work at DC West Coast. It was a lot of the video game related stuff, and I even wrapped up. I did two of the last issues of Authority, and then I did the final two issues of Wildcats before they shut shop down on that. And then I was doing other projects for them, and that's how I ended up on Injustice.
Mhm.
And then Injustice just blew up. It became it was the number one digital comic on the planet. New York Times bestseller every time a new book came out. The royalties on that book were the best royalties I've seen in my entire career. Um, and then after, so Tom Taylor wrote Injustice, right?
You have to forgive me. I'm not super up on American comics, but
Oh, okay. Well, Tom Taylor is he's another one of those people who might be described as an SJW. But prior to Trump being elected, Tom and I were friends, and we just had this agreement: we're not going to talk politics. But after Trump got elected, uh, my work on Injustice got thinner and thinner.
so it
So
was
I
that
believe there
recent.
was a certain Trump derangement syndrome that may have kicked in. I can't, I can't say that for a certainty. I just noticed the work getting thinner and thinner, and this was coincidentally when Trump got elected.
So you had been working on it consistently until 2016. You were still working with them.
I was working on, well, it was Injustice 1. I did roughly a third of the entire series.
Mm.
And then there was a break, and then Injustice 2 started up. Well, there was Injustice Ground Zero, but I was like, uh, I don't think I did anything in Injustice Ground Zero. And then Injustice 2 started up, and they're like, well, we're going to try a different tact. This is what I was told. We're going to try a different tact on this where we're going to have different teams working on specific character arcs, so it's not so haphazard. And that made sense to me, except for my character arc was Supergirl, and Supergirl's character arc got smaller and smaller, and then her character arc got folded into like the Wonder Woman character arc or something like that. I don't know. I didn't even read the book. Um, and then I didn't even bother calling anymore because by that time, I had already been working on and launching Lone Star, and doing my own crowdfunding stuff, and I'm not interested in work for hire stuff at
Mhm.
this point. I still do the Game of Thrones covers, but that's more out of loyalty to George R. R. Martin than it is to the cover doing the cover rate. It's really more of a something it's an obligation.
Mhm.
I feel obligated. George is a super, super loyal guy. George is super left wing, right? Um, and we've known that about each other for decades. But he's a super loyal guy. He's like, I dance with the one that brung me, right? Like that's always been his thing.
Mhm.
And so he's loyal to me. I'm going to be loyal to him. So I'm not, even in the face of the controversy with Nick Barucci. I'm not. Let's not even get into that. But even in the face of that, I'm not going to quit his project. right? So I will maintain working for Dynamite to do George's covers just out of loyalty to him. So
I understand. I guess if I'm trying to, part of the thing that I try to tap into with these conversations is to sort of extract lessons for indie people who are trying to figure out how to navigate whatever the industry is today. Like, I still barely have a map. I don't know what's going on half the time. But it looks like because there is a majority that people on our side, whatever that means, knows that there's a majority in the industry that either wants silence from people like yourself, or they're just going to replace you.
It's true. It's not like there aren't conservative and conservative Christian people in comics. I'm very good friends with some of them. It's that you're not to, and it's not like they're saying, "Hey, don't talk about this stuff," right? It's that they're, well, I don't want to name names, but like one of my very, very good friends, probably one of my best friends in comics, he just doesn't do social media. He's as far right wing as I am, and if you're talking to him over dinner, he's got. I mean, we agree on 98% of everything, right? Um, but he has no social media presence to speak of.
No interest or
He doesn't.
consequences?
No, it's not even about consequences. He just doesn't want to do it.
I see.
You know, and I know more than one guy like that. Actually, I know one guy who's like that, except he's on Facebook, but he only talks politics in private groups. Right? Some of these guys, they're and maybe they're smarter than I am. I have a hard time shutting up, and so maybe that's what causes friction. And but that's me. And look, that's been me the entire time social media has been a thing. Ever since the AOL message boards, that's been me. And so I can't pretend to be somebody else for the sake of trying to garner a wider audience. Because say some SJW finds Lone Star and they're like, "Oh, this looks fantastic. I even like the whatever." And then they go and they back a campaign, and then someone's like, "Yeah, but that's Mike S. Miller. Haven't you heard? He's an istophobe." And then they do a Google search and they see, "I have a 20-year history on the internet I cannot make believe doesn't exist." And so there's no point in pretending like it doesn't. There's no point in pretending to be somebody that I'm not. No, I'm not. I try to be as polite with people I disagree with as possible. I think that insulting people is the fastest way to get them not to listen to you. And I'm not perfect, but as far as the people that I know who are really right wing, really conservative, who are still working at the big two, they essentially say nothing in public. And whether that is by design or by circumstance, it's the same result.
I suppose it's a case of the greasy wheel gets the grease, or the squeaky wheel, excuse me, gets the grease. Culturally speaking, it's outside of anyone's control of what's the popular thing to talk about these days. If everyone loves the color red, if you're the one artist who uses blue and you won't use red, you're gonna get talked to or get the business, whatever. I notice that. All right, so you say a lot of artists are either silent or they move on. So we know a lot of artists who are now in the indie world, and we're all sort of trying to navigate these new waters that between the internet, crowdfunding, social media, this loose network that everyone sort of knows each other's name. Where do you think it is now? Where is it going? What can we do to find our audience, even though, let's say, for instance, they can look up they know who you are when they buy one of your books. what's the way forward for an indie creator these days? What do you think?
Man, I mean, it's work. It's work. Um, I was just saying on another interview, man, I wish I was one of these guys like Cheeks. You know Cheeks, Sean Galloway,
Not familiar.
or Elliot Fernandez. These guys
Hmm.
have been building um like Instagram followers for years, right? I was always too busy just head down and drawing to worry about building, finding my fans, because I have fans out there, right? I mean, again, in Injustice was a huge hit, but that's the local comic book shop, right? How do I translate those guys out there to, finding me on Indiegogo or Kickstarter?
Hmm.
That's work. It's almost ground zero. I mean, I hopefully I have a few hundred that do find me, but if there's thousands out there and I can't find them, I might as well be nobody to them, right? And so it's work. You're um I have a little bit of a head start, I would say, against somebody who is coming in raw with no fan base, but man, there's a ton of people on Instagram and on what used to be DeviantArt or whatever who have way bigger accessible fans because they built them through social media
Hmm.
instead of building them through Marvel or DC, right?
Right, because
Or
it was a
a
work for
company.
hire.
Right.
Yeah.
So do the work to build that fan base. And honestly, there's guys who are way better suited to tell you what to do. I mean, there's YouTube videos out there how to build your Instagram, how to build your Patreon, how to build your blah blah blah. And uh I just don't have the time to I'm so busy actually producing stuff
Hmm.
that I don't have the time to do that, even though I know it's fundamental to this business model. Build your fan base, and not just a fan base, build an accessible fan base. That's why when to me the most important part of my crowdfunding is my mailing list, right?
Hmm.
Because those people are people who they've already purchased from me, they are already interested in me, and I have a direct communicative, it's like if I post something to Facebook, like some tiny percentage of the people who follow me will see it in the feed.
Hmm.
But if I have somebody on my mailing list, that is somebody who already wants my stuff and just needs to be notified to see if they're interested in my next project.
Hmm.
So build that mailing list, build a fan base that is accessible as possible, and get them to sign up to your mailing list or some sort of a service wherein you can contact them every time you have something you want to promote.
Hmm.
That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, it's
And
almost.
again, it doesn't matter if it's me or it's Jay Lee or it's Joe Schmo, right?
Yeah.
It's we all kind of there's 7 billion people on this planet we can reach, and even someone who's successful enough to have 1,000 fans buying their books, there's 7 billion more people out there. We can all reach enough of them to make this a go.
Hmm. Yeah, it's. I've noticed there's. Well, all right. So there's a lot of amazingly talented veterans of the industry, and then it's almost like the internet created a new frontier, where
Mm-hmm.
it's none of the same rules apply anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and no one really knows how to navigate it. Every time one person discovers a new gimmick, it's like the door closes immediately afterwards, and you can't copy it. You have to find some other way. But I've found it fascinating as a science to sort of see what has been working for whom, sort of to try to understand the science of how can an indie creator gain followers, let's say, and find time to write books and market them, because marketing and creating books are two almost, I would say,
Different
they
skills.
they go in opposite directions. Because I've always seen art as an introverted skill. You spend a lot of time by yourself at your desk in your own head, and then extroverts are amazing at selling things, but then they can't find the time to make the books. Do you think that's accurate?
Uh, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of people. For me, I'm an extrovert.
Hmm.
But and so that's why I can sit here and I can draw and I can have carry on a conversation at the same time.
Oh, okay.
I'm not drawing right now. I probably should be, but that's why a lot of times on my streams that I'm not here. I'm not looking up articles for to entertain everybody. I'm not here to be Johnny Carson, right? I'm here to be Mike Miller. Mike Miller is an artist. I want to share that time and be able to speak to the crowd, speak to my friends who I have on the show at the same time that I'm drawing. But I know there's some people they can't. It's like it's a switch in their head, right? It's like drawing, communicating,
Hmm.
and for me, there's a limited amount of time in my process where I'm like, shut up, I'm thinking. After that, it's scribbling to me. It's just I'm just filling in details,
I see.
and it's a not it's almost autopilot. So I can, and that's what I've always done ever since I was younger. I back when I would just sit at home in my office or my little cubby or whatever drawing, I'd have my Plantronics headphone on, I'd have my Rolodex, and I would be calling people all day long so they could keep me occupied while I'm drawing,
Hmm.
right? So
I
I'm either
see.
listening to something on the radio or I'm talking to somebody, because I feel like if I'm just drawing, I'm not utilizing my time,
I see.
right?
That's a very. I'm very jealous of that skill. I
Yeah,
can't.
everybody's different, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's very
yeah,
interesting. One of the questions I want to ask, and I don't know how much. I usually do an hour. Do you mind if we go a little longer?
sure.
All right. I just have a few more questions about your process. I'm curious, while you're on that subject, what your daily work routine is like, and do you have preferred hours during the day when you can focus the best,
Daily. Well,
or
I
or
live
weekly?
in the cacophony of a house with 5 children, who I kicked them out for the purposes of this interview. But if anybody watches any of my streams, they'll see there's always at least one child in here. There's usually two. Sometimes the entire family is in here. Um,
Your office.
my process is I get on here. I try to handle some emails. I try to handle some stuff I can handle on the computer. I try to do my ministry show cross examinations. The first thing I do on the internet, right? Like not the internet, but the first stream. I don't want to stream anything else unless I do cross examinations first, and I try to do that every weekday. Actually, I do it every weekday. I've missed very few. Um, and then I draw when I can, but it's when you're in the middle of your drawing, you're fulfilling, you're ordering patches and cards and dealing with printers and just the myriad business issues you have to take care of at the same time. You're trying to get a book out on time. um, I don't know, man. I pull my hair out sometimes because, back when it was just me drawing a paycheck from DC and I'd just sit down, I'd bang out 5 pages a week, easy. That
Mhm.
was that was that was a no-brainer. 5 pages, pencils and inks every week, at least minimum. And now it's like it's Friday today. I've got 1 page drawn this week,
Mhm.
and that kills me as an artist. And I still have 80 packages to fulfill on Lone Star 2, and these are my high ticket backers. Like, I take care of the thousands of guys that only order 1 or 2 books at first, because take care of as many people as possible, but as soon as possible. But at the same time, it's like you kind of want to take care of your whales.
I understand.
But those packages, some of them take so long to pack. It's like I fulfilled 2,000 packages in a couple weeks, and now I've got these last 80, and they take like, some of them usually, the bigger ones, 15, 20 minutes, half an hour to fulfill like one package. There's one, this guy ordered 62 different items off of my campaign.
Wow.
I've got 3 huge boxes in there because I'm shipping them to Australia, and so I've got to like make sure they're super padded and all this stuff. I've got 3 huge boxes in there packed up. I've still got a stack of comics this big to pack up for him, and I mean that's like an entire day, and I'm not even done. So ideally, I'd like to sit down and do a page a day, but realistically, it's just not happening. So
Yeah, that's the problem with the indie thing, is that you
Yeah.
have to be your own businessman.
Yeah.
And I mean, art and writing are full-time jobs by
And
themselves.
marketing. Yeah. Yeah.
And on top of that, I mean, even something as simple as packing boxes and can take up, like you say, the whole day. It exhausts you. You don't want to do other things. And then you mentioned things like working from home. How has parenting, has that affected, or how did that impact your career, and how does it get in the way now? Do you like hire your kids to help you out, or?
I'm gonna hire Eden to handle some of my social media stuff.
Mhm.
Um, Elijah was supposed to be doing a lot of the video work and transferring videos from one channel to the other, but he's just kind of dropped the ball on that. Um, Isaac is getting a little older. I'll probably try to tap him for some kind of job here. He was very helpful. Actually, a lot of them were helpful during the fulfillment. But that's another thing. That's why I'm like, I got 2,000 packages out in 2 weeks. It was because these were the packages where you're like, okay, I have 100 orders of this. When you have 100 orders of this book, you can do the what do they call that? Except the what Ford created, assembly line.
Assembly line.
You can
Yeah.
do the assembly line when it's that.
Yeah.
When it's okay, I need 3 of these books, 2 of these books, 1 of these books, 1 of these cards, 1 of this, 1 of this. This have to be signed individually. I have to keep restocking my signed books because then it becomes a labor of one, and just the brakes slam on my entire process. So It's it is what it is.
Which stories
But
are you? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying it's kids having kids. I don't know. It's been so long. I've had kids. Elijah's 19 now, so I've had kids for 2/3 of my career. It doesn't really. I don't think about how it has affected the change from 2 decades ago.
I see. Well, I'll ask. I have questions about that maybe in the future. I need to ask for advice about that sort of thing. But unrelated, I want to ask you finally about career stuff. What you're working on now? What books are you doing now? What campaigns are you running? What are your plans for the rest of 2020?
Well, like I said, I need to finish up sending out these whale packages for Lone Star 2. I've got 7 pages plus a cover of Lone Star 3 done. I do plan on soliciting that by October, or in October at the very latest. I am working on what I deem the secret project, which is I'm working with a YouTuber that has 1 million subscribers on a project of his. I'm adapting a novel that he has written.
Cool.
And so hopefully that will be hugely successful. And then I have the only book I have available. Well, the only store I have available right now is in demand. It's maga7.com on Indiegogo, Magnificent 7. It's my political parody book. That the files went to the printer yesterday. I need an update on when those are going to be ready for print, but that should be soon. Hopefully I'll have those in hand in a little more than a couple weeks, and I'll back to fulfillment again on another campaign while I'm trying to get this other thing done. See, the issue is I wanted to have the secret project done because he wants it done before we solicit or before we launch the campaign. But I want to have Lone Star and done. It's just I have so much on my plate.
Yeah, it's a lot of spinning plates, and sometimes you have to let a few of them drop on purpose, and that kills me. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you know about I have this thing, the Mary Sue campaign. If anyone's listening,
Mhm.
I'm actually having to drop that. Like,
What?
I'm just letting it go.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm realizing career-wise, I know my own limitations, and
Uh-huh.
I'm already sleeping like 5 hours a day, and I don't know how I would be able to stay healthy
Uh,
doing all that. But from what you're describing, it's like either you have to choose terminal exhaustion, or you're gonna do all these projects and find superhuman strength to be able to do all those.
well,
But you're gonna
the,
go for it. You're going for all of it.
I'm going for it, and um, it's really just a matter of timing. Because the more you put on your plate, the longer it's going to take you to get any particular thing done, right? If I just said, all right, screw the rest of this, my backers can wait, Lone Star 2 can wait, MAGA 7, they're just going to be late. I'm going to finish the secret project so we can solicit. I'd have it done in a month, right? But
But
yeah, when you start juggling, everything slows down. Everything slows down.
and the trouble with the
So
campaign is that you've made the commitment already. They've
that's
funded
right.
it.
That's right.
Yeah. So either you have angry customers or you exhaust yourself.
Yeah, and what do you want? Do you want angry customers now, or do you want to focus on being able to gain more customers? Because say this secret project brings in 10, 15,000 new eyeballs,
Yeah.
new backers who likewise may be interested in my other projects. I mean, that's the whole reason I agreed to be the artist on this project was like, hey, look, if you've got you got a million
For
subs.
sure. Yeah.
If if you're going to help me, because otherwise, I'd just be working on Lone Star 3, and frankly, I'd be if I had spent all the time I did on the secret project on Lone Star 3, I'd almost be done with the book,
hmm
right? I'd be like 12 pages away from finishing the book. Um, and I make a significant amount of money on Lone Star 3. My last campaign was over $170,000. So I'm like, look, I can either do that and make a lot for myself, or if we're going to do this, it's going to be for the purpose of you promoting me, right? In the process, it's not just a paycheck. The paycheck is it's nominal at this point, right?
Well, that's yeah.
I need those fans. I need
Having
those
readers is as valuable a currency as the money itself.
more so,
Yeah, because
more
they
so.
they represent potential income in the
That's
future.
right. That's right.
It's a
And
crazy bet that you have to make.
yeah, the whole process, even if you're paying for advertising, right? I always have the mindset that if I can break even on advertising, if I can spend $1,000 and get $1,000 worth of backers,
Yeah.
those are that's fine because that's a break even, and that's locking in. If I got somebody who's willing to buy my comic book and they get it in their hands, I think 80% of them or more are going to be like, this is great, I'm going to buy the next one,
hmm
right? So if I can break even on spending money advertising on Facebook, I feel like that's me locking in future revenues. So that's why I'm okay taking what is essentially a pay cut to do this project, because a million subs are, potentially going to, and it's not going to, say we get a tiny percentage of a million, is still 10,000 people.
Yeah, you can't say no
Right?
to you can't say no to that. No. Yeah, I mean that's a new problem that indie creators have to decide. What's more valuable, money now or possible money in the future?
Right.
Um,
Yep.
even I don't know the answer to that question right now. But it's
Well, it
interesting.
depends on how desperate you are now.
Um, well, I have the ability to live off almost nothing, and
Oh, there you go.
that's a superpower of mine.
That is a fantastic superpower. I live in San Diego and I have 5 children and 2 mortgages, so
I
that is not a
understand. Yeah,
superpower that I am accustomed to.
no, I only say that as a joke. I don't really mean that. But no, it is something that I'm having to decide. Am I going to gamble? I don't like to gamble. I don't. But as an indie person, I mean that's really the big question: is do I work on something now that will give me an income? Or do I try to expand the audience and all that stuff? And I've seen that second question, I've seen that go horribly wrong, where a person tries to build and maintain, because once you have the audience, you have to keep the audience, because they'll go away. I've seen people try to maintain their audience and they don't work on their books at all.
Mm,
And you and I have seen that go very, very wrong.
yeah.
So I don't know what the right answer is, and we're learning from each other's mistakes too. We've seen people make great mistakes.
Brave new world, George.
I don't know, but you know what? I mean, this is, for want of a better word, this is a calling for us where we seem to be crazy enough to want to keep doing this.
I
So
know.
all we can do is learn from each other.
Yep.
For everyone listening, of course, I don't. What do you want to plug your social media and all that stuff? How can we find you and your work?
Yeah, well, ideally they would subscribe to blacklistuniverse.com. That's my YouTube channel. Don't bother following me on Twitter. It's a time suck and it's hell.
Hmm.
But Blacklist Universe on YouTube. I'm Underdog Mike on Instagram, although I don't post there very often. Mostly I'm just on YouTube. Um, on Facebook, it's Mike S. Miller Art. And I do have a store on my MikeSMillerArt.com page or website. I need to have that website revamped though.
Yeah, I
It's
have to. How can we possibly find time? I have the same
yeah,
problem.
right.
But yeah, Instagram's actually I've found to be great because people don't really interact on Instagram; they just look at pictures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
And so, I do have projects on upcoming on Indiegogo and on Kickstarter. Um, the one I have up right now is maga7.com, but that's for the political sphere.
mhm.
LoneStarComic.com. It'll take you to a currently not a currently closed campaign, but as soon as I start up Lone Star 3, I will transfer LoneStarComic.com to the next book. So,
Mhm.
or I should move it to my website. I don't know, but
Everywhere
LoneStarComic.com.
really.
Just bookmark it.
But yeah, for everyone listening, there's also a show on Mike's channel called Drawn and Quartered, which I've been on a couple of times.
Yeah, you got to get back on there. You dropped out of the room though.
I did. No, I've been overwhelmed with so many other personal things, and like I can't stay up late doing that
Mm.
stuff. But maybe once in a blue moon, I can jump on for fun. But yeah, that's
Uh-huh.
an amazing show. If anyone's listening and they're interested in watching artists do what they do, it's a lot of fun to
It's a
watch
fight to
them.
the death.
That part makes me so nervous I can't perform. But I love the Bob Rossiness of it. I love watching people work in a chill environment.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
like Bob Ross meets UFC.
yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, I can actually leave links to that in the description. But yeah,
Right.
everything you mentioned, I'll leave links to down below for everyone listening. Is
And we
there any?
also do Friday night auctions, although I don't know if we're going to stick to Fridays after the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Um, but yeah.
Oh, one last question then, because I'm sure the election is on everyone's mind. Like, what do you think is going to happen? If
Trump
you
will
even
be
want to
elected.
answer that.
Trump will be reelected for the rest of time.
Oh my goodness. I'm personally looking forward to the debates more than anything. I'm seeing it as a sporting
Uh,
event.
I that feels so sad to me.
I think it's going to be a horrible mess, but I'm going
It
to have my popcorn.
is. Uh,
I feel bad
I
for
mean, we,
them.
we could do a whole nother show
I
on
know.
that.
I'm so sorry. It's just the thing that's on everyone's mind right now. All right. Yeah. I'll
It's
ask another
elderly
time.
abuse, man. They're just
It's
oh,
very
something
cruel. I
about
agree. It's terrible. He, we could talk about this another time,
yeah,
but yeah, I think it's a very exciting time to be alive and
yeah.
also to be an indie creator.
And for you, getting all these shout outs on Tim Pool.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. I've actually not. I haven't thought about it because I don't know what my brain. I don't know how to solve that puzzle. So I'm just continuing what I do every day. Uh,
Is he's sharing your stuff out, right?
yeah, it seems so. They have. I haven't watched the second one, the recent one, because I get too nervous. But
Is
I
he been
guess
sharing out every single thing you post?
I don't know. I haven't.
Hold on, I'm
I,
going
I
to.
can't look because I get sick. you know, but yeah, apparently they like my stuff, so it's been fun to sort of get lots of new people reading my stuff. But the way that I think of it is like swimming is the same whether you're in a pool or the ocean. So I'm kind of doing the same thing I would do even if I had 250 people 2 years ago on Twitter. So it seems to be working. I'm happy about that. I don't know if that's going to change anything in the future. But as far as this indie audience thing goes, I want to see. Because people can read my stuff and then vanish tomorrow, for
Yeah.
all I know. So I want to see if they're going to stick around after the elections and all that stuff. And then I'll see what business wise I can do with it. Right now, I don't know what to do about it.
Well, there's always people worthy of mocking in politics and media. So if you want to
It's hard because I don't want to mock exactly. It's more like people who are full of themselves. I don't mind
mocking them,
poking just a little bit.
the
Like
word
they,
is mock, George. It's
I
okay.
guess. Like I would do Trump too, except everyone's already doing it, so it's not funny to me. And then anyway, that's a whole other topic, I
Yeah.
guess. But yeah, I'm curious to see what's going to happen for the rest of the year. But I want all of us indie creators to be able to find our groove. Finally, it's been such a rocky path so far. It's so frustrating, but it's like finally, can we find and keep an audience for goodness sakes? But yeah, I guess I'll thank you for coming, Mike. For everyone
Absolutely.
listening, links are in the description. Is there anything you want to say to everyone listening?
Um. Yeah. Somebody was saying they were quitting art the other day. Um. Look, you're an artist because you love art, right? And if you're doing it, that I always say that the fastest way to lose a love for something is by doing it for a living.
Yeah, it's true.
Um, if you can't make a living, or if you're sacrificing the love you have for your craft because you're forced to make a living, I don't know. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not, right? I'm not telling anybody to just quit art, but we do it because we love it, and do it because you love it. If doing it for a living is making you hate it, then go wash dishes for a living and keep loving your art.
Mm.
You don't
That's a
have to wash dishes. I'm just saying. I mean,
No, I totally understand. I mean, I've been there. No, I totally agree with that advice. I think our bodies have a way of telling us that something's wrong.
mhm.
It just sends signals like, don't do this, this is not you. And yeah, trying to do it for a living, if it sucks away the passion, that's your body's way of telling you this is not what you should be doing. But if you do or ever have enjoyed drawing, I think that's also your inner self telling you, I need to do this. And and
And that's the wonderful thing about like these people who are finding these huge audiences on social media is a lot of these people they're gaining these huge fan bases based on the stuff they just love doing and love posting,
yeah,
right? And so it's this weird cosmetic kind of I don't know. It's just it's a like I said, it's a brave new world, man.
it's
It's a brave.
strange. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a friend who was a non-artist. I was complaining about how I don't enjoy drawing anymore.
Mm.
And she told me, why don't you make it so that you do enjoy it? And at the time, it seemed really mundane, but the more I thought about it, I said, wait, why don't. Like, I didn't like my drawing style because it was taking too much time.
Mm.
I don't like spending more than a few hours on a piece. I get really antsy.
Mm.
So I just said, why don't I just leave my stuff unfinished and sketchy like an impressionist? And then I realized I can draw like several pages a day, and my readers don't seem to mind that the pages look unfinished. They kind of like it, actually. And I
It's a
said,
style.
yeah, like if I tell myself, if I enjoy doing this and if my readers don't mind, why is this not just my style from now on?
Right.
And now I'm having fun and people seem to like it. So yeah, that's the advice I would give to anyone struggling, is like, make it so that you enjoy the art again, and
Yeah.
then the whatever success happens is icing on the cake. But the point is, I believe in like art as a therapy. Even do it so that it feels good and makes you happy. that that's the reason of doing an art, I would say.
Yeah, I kind of think that way when it comes to like inking. I've always found inking very therapeutic because really it's mindless. I mean, to me, I'm not sitting there thinking, how thick should this line be?
Mhm.
You know, I'm not doing calculations in my head. I'm just putting ink on paper,
Because the
and
map is already there.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just traveling. That's really interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that's cool. And you do broadcast yourself drawing, right, on the show, on
I
your
do,
channel?
I do.
Yeah. So if you guys want to see him work and ink and stuff, go to his channel and check it out. Link will be in the description. But yeah, so thanks again for coming. I'm sorry for going over time.
No
This has
worries.
been fascinating conversation. But yeah,
Yeah, good stuff, man.
thanks so much.
Let's do
Uh,
this again. Get on my channel sometime, George.
for sure, anytime. Okay, so thanks everyone for listening. Talk to you guys next time.